Jennifer Moss's The Burnout Epidemic argues that burnout is not a personal weakness or a failure of resilience, but a predictable outcome of how modern systems are designed. From the start, the book reframes burnout as a public health and organizational problem rather than an individual one. Moss emphasizes that when entire populations are exhausted, anxious, and disengaged, the issue cannot be solved with self-care alone. This shift in perspective is the foundation for everything that follows. The book defines burnout as a state of chronic workplace stress that has not been successfully managed, aligning with the World Health Organization's definition. Moss explains that burnout shows up through emotional exhaustion, cynicism or detachment, and a reduced sense of effectiveness. Importantly, she stresses that burnout is not the same as stress. Stress can be temporary and motivating, while burnout is prolonged, draining, and numbing, leaving people feeling empty rather than overwhelmed. Moss explores how burnout became widespread long before global crises made it more visible. She describes a culture obsessed with productivity, constant availability, and performance metrics that value output over human capacity. Technology blurred the boundaries between work and rest, while job insecurity made people afraid to slow down. Over time, this created environments where people felt replaceable, monitored, and under constant pressure to prove their worth. A major theme of the book is that organizations often respond to burnout incorrectly. Moss critiques common fixes like mindfulness apps, yoga sessions, or wellness emails that tell employees to take better care of themselves. While these tools can help individuals cope, she argues they become harmful when they are used to shift responsibility away from leadership. When people are encouraged to meditate instead of having workloads reduced, the system remains unchanged. The book explains how chronic burnout affects the brain and body. Moss describes how long-term stress alters decision-making, memory, sleep, and emotional regulation. People in burnout are not lazy or unmotivated, their nervous systems are stuck in survival mode. This biological framing helps remove shame and shows why pushing harder almost always makes things worse. Moss also highlights how burnout disproportionately affects certain groups. Women, caregivers, young workers, and marginalized communities often face higher emotional labor, fewer boundaries, and less control over their work. The book explains that inequity itself is a burnout risk factor. When people feel unseen, unsupported, or unfairly treated, exhaustion deepens even if workloads appear reasonable on paper. Trust emerges as a central solution throughout the book. Moss shows that environments with high trust consistently report lower burnout, even under pressure. Trust is built when leaders communicate transparently, follow through on promises, and treat employees as humans rather than resources. Without trust, even small stressors feel overwhelming because people are constantly bracing for harm. Psychological safety is another key concept. Moss explains that when people feel safe to speak up, make mistakes, and ask for help, stress does not accumulate in the same damaging way. Burnout thrives in silence. Cultures that punish vulnerability or reward overwork push people to hide exhaustion until it becomes severe. Creating safety is not about comfort, but about honesty. The book spends significant time discussing workload design. Moss argues that burnout is often caused by sustained overload combined with low control. She encourages organizations to regularly assess whether expectations match reality. This includes examining staffing levels, deadlines, and the hidden labor people perform that is never acknowledged. Sustainable work, she insists, must be designed intentionally. Moss also challenges the idea that passion protects against burnout. In fact, she explains that people who care deeply are often at higher risk because they are willing to sacrifice themselves for the work. Employers may unintentionally exploit this dedication by rewarding overextension. The book calls for redefining commitment as consistency rather than self-sacrifice. Another powerful section focuses on recovery. Moss makes it clear that burnout cannot be solved by short breaks alone. True recovery requires reducing stressors, not just escaping them briefly. She explains that if people return to the same conditions that caused burnout, symptoms will quickly return. Recovery is both personal and structural. The book offers guidance for leaders on how to respond when burnout is already present. Moss emphasizes listening without defensiveness, validating experiences without minimizing them, and taking visible action. Even small changes, when they are sincere and consistent, can begin restoring trust. What matters most is that people see proof that their well-being is taken seriously. Moss also speaks directly to individuals, while maintaining that the burden should not rest on them alone. She encourages people to recognize burnout signals early, name systemic problems clearly, and resist internalizing blame. Setting boundaries is framed not as selfishness, but as a form of self-preservation in unsustainable systems. Toward the end, the book broadens its lens to society as a whole. Moss argues that burnout is a warning sign that how we measure success is broken. When efficiency, speed, and profit override health, creativity, and meaning, burnout becomes inevitable. Addressing it requires rethinking values, not just policies.